Welcome. The whole world has been under a lockdown and everybody is just concerned with one topic, that is the coronavirus or C virus. I am Dr. A.K. Venkatachalam, an orthopedic surgeon in Chennai. My interests are joint replacement, cellular therapy and arthroscopy. The purpose of my talk is to provide a clear understanding of the developments in the C virus. Hence, the title of these videos is C Viral Logic. In these videos, I will analyze the latest trends of COVID-19, its prevention and treatment. These videos will be posted on my YouTube channel Madras Joint Replacement Center MJRC and will also be shared on my website www.drakvenkat.com. Please post your comments. If you find this video useful, like and share it. I request you to subscribe and hit the bell icon to receive notification of further videos. In today's video, I will talk about vaccines. The first episode will be a general discussion on vaccines. In the next one, I will rely on this video's context to discuss how the leading vaccine contenders for COVID-19 are faring so far. Every day the context changes in this highly complex field and my content will be objective only until the date of its creation. Okay, so what is a vaccine? Vaccine is a substance used to stimulate the production of antibodies and provide immunity against one or several diseases prepared from the causative agent of a disease, its products, or a synthetic substitute, treated to act as an antigen without inducing the disease. Basically, virus acts as an antigen. The smallpox vaccine was the first vaccine to be developed against a contagious disease. In 1796, the British doctor Edward Jenner demonstrated that an infection with the relatively mild cowpox virus conferred immunity against the deadly smallpox virus. Cowpox served as a natural vaccine until the modern smallpox vaccine emerged in the 19th century. The Jenner Institute at the University of Oxford is the seat of one of the forerunner vaccines candidates today, namely the Oxford vaccine. How do vaccines work? Vaccines teach your body how to defend itself when germs such as viruses or bacteria invade it. I would like to take the analogy of a martial arts instructor or karate teacher who teaches you karate. Your body learns the skill and responds to the same threat in future. Vaccines expose you to a very small, very safe amount of viruses or bacteria that have been weakened or killed. Your immune system then learns to recognize, and as a result, you will not become ill, or you may have a milder infection. This is a natural way to deal with infectious diseases. What is the immune system? It consists of the organs and processes of the body that provide resistance to infection and toxins. Organs include the thymus, bone marrow, and lymph nodes. Cells and antibodies perform the functions. The cells are T cells and B cells. These are types of lymphocytes. T cells are responsible for cell-mediated immunity, whereas B cells are responsible for humoral or antibody type. Vaccines acting as antigens produce their protective effect by inducing active immunity and providing immunological memory. Those substances in our body which provide immunity are called antibodies. They bind to antigens on infectious agents from outside and kill or neutralize them. Immunological memory enables the immune system to recognize and respond rapidly to exposure to natural diseases later and thus to prevent or modify the disease. This long-term memory function is provided by certain cells called T cells and B cells. The types of vaccines are live attenuated vaccines, for example, measles, mumps, rubella, MMR vaccines, which all infants receive in the first year of life. Number second is inactivated vaccines, example, polio, flu, rabies, hepatitis A. In these vaccines, the viruses have been inactivated by formaldehyde. The third category are subunit recombinant vaccines. For example, hepatitis B. The earlier one was hepatitis A. This is hepatitis B, which causes jaundice again. Other examples are pneumococcal vaccine, meningococcal vaccine. The fourth one are toxoid vaccines. Toxoid vaccines, for example, are diphtheria and tetanus. These diseases, it is not the bacterium that is the culprit, but the toxin. Next one is nucleic acid vaccine, DNA and RNA. You know that DNA and RNA are the two types of nucleic acids, and viruses are basically pieces of DNA or RNA. Currently, there are no RNA vaccines in human beings. However, research has been going on, and in the future, there may be some vaccines based on RNA DNA. An example, probable example, would be one for HIV. There is one DNA vaccine under development for COVID-19 now. Vector vaccines, example, adenovirus vaccine. The development of vaccines is a lengthy process. Before a vaccine is tested in humans, it is first tested in animals like mice, rats, and monkeys to see if they develop antibodies. The animals develop antibodies. Usually, the monkeys which are used are rhesus macaque monkeys originating from India. Before a vaccine is developed, it undergoes rigorous testing. Vaccines are subject to even tougher standards than medicines. More people are included in clinical trials and safety standards are extremely high as compared to medicines. A new vaccine is first tested in a very small group of people to rule out major safety problems and helps doctors to work out the right dose. Next, it is tested in a larger group to check that the vaccine works consistently, and scientists watch out for any side effects. Then the vaccine is tested in tens of thousands of healthy volunteers. This shows whether the vaccine protects against natural infection and gives a better chance of discovering rare problems not seen in smaller studies. But it doesn't end there. If the vaccine passes all of these tests and is approved by regulators, it is continuously monitored after being released in the market. The vaccines available to use today have been given to millions of people, preventing illnesses and saving lives. You can summarize the development of vaccine under three phases. Phase 1, here the focus is on safety. So a small group of healthy volunteers gets the vaccine, maybe 5 or 6. You try out different dosages to create the strongest immune response at the lowest effective dose without side effects. Phase 2, the focus is on efficacy. Once the formula of ideal dosage and maximum benefit is worked out, one moves on to phase 2, which tells us how well the vaccine works in the people who are intended to get it. In this phase, few hundreds of people get the vaccine. This group should include people of different ages and health statuses. Phase 3, here again the focus is on efficacy in a much larger group for testing the safety and efficacy of the vaccine. This phase is the longest phase because you want to check out for any side effects in the long run. So if the disease is prevalent, then phase 3 can be continued with the confidence that you can watch out for side effects in the long term. So this phase 3, is the longest phase. These people are likely to be at risk of infection by the pathogen, and wait and see if the vaccine reduces how many people get sick. After the clinical trials, as described before, are completed, the manufacturing process is initiated. Money is invested into factories and equipment for manufacture of the vaccine. Supply chains are set up, distributors and dealers are appointed, and the vaccine is marketed and shipped if a factory is located overseas. The vaccine is submitted to the WHO and the various governments for approval. This is the normal course. In the normal course, it can take a long time. 5 years have been the record so far. The goal for COVID-19 vaccines is 12 to 18 months. Experts say testing of a vaccine for the new coronavirus will be much faster than for a typical vaccine, and if it materializes, it will be a record. It is encouraging to hear that vaccine for the coronavirus may be available by late this year or early next year. It is to induce herd immunity in a population which was previously susceptible. Herd immunity is the indirect protection from a contagious or infectious disease that happens when a population is immune either through vaccination or immunity developed through previous infection. This means that even people who are vaccinated, all in whom the vaccine doesn't trigger immunity, are protected because people around them can act as buffers between them and an infected person. Once herd immunity has been established for a while and the speed of the disease spread hindered, the disease can even be eliminated. This is how the world eradicated smallpox, for example. To understand herd immunity, let's see these two diagrams. So, this is a picture of a herd immunity. Say there are 4 people here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 people, and the virus can infect this person, the first person. The first person can pass it on to the second person. The second person will pass it on to the third person. The third person will pass it on to the fourth person. This will happen if everybody is susceptible in a population. If there is herd immunity in the population, for example, in this patient, then the first person here will get infected, and when he tries to pass on to this person, as he is already immune, the virus will not infect him and it will stop there. So therefore he cannot pass it on to the third person or to the fourth person. The second person acts as a barrier to transmission. Once again, it is more clearly seen here. Say this person is the infected person in a population, and these are all other people. So this infected person can pass on the infection to this person, but fortunately this person has got immunity either achieved through vaccination or he has acquired the disease and he's become immune. Therefore, he has got antibodies in his blood. These antibodies in his blood will neutralize and kill the virus, and the virus cannot pass through him and it cannot go to these other people here in the community. So the virus stops there and it cannot progress beyond this person to the other people. How can herd immunity be achieved? Herd immunity can be achieved by vaccination or by infection. Herd immunity achieved through infection is called natural herd immunity. Natural herd immunity is normally not the strategy in itself for very dangerous illnesses. Natural herd immunity achieved through infection can be challenging to induce through unchecked infection, as there would be a very high rate of serious illness and death. And the health systems will be overwhelmed well beyond their surge capacity even in high income countries. Therefore, herd immunity is generally pursued through vaccination programs. Even when vaccines are available, it is not always possible to achieve herd immunity for very long. Some viruses such as seasonal flu mutate frequently, evading the body's immune response. So it does not always last forever, which is why the flu shot is necessary every single year. The more infectious the disease, the greater the population immunity to ensure herd immunity. The more infectious the disease, the greater the population immunity needed to ensure herd immunity. For example, measles is highly contagious or highly infectious, and one person with measles can infect up to 18 other people. This means that around 95% of people need to be immune in order for the wider group to have herd immunity. The new coronavirus has a lower infection rate than measles, with each infected person passing it on to 2 or 3 people on average. This means that herd immunity should be achieved when around 60% of the population become immune to COVID-19. There is a mathematical formula for working out this, but I won't be discussing this here. Those of you who are interested may refer online. For the present, I will just cite an example of the local state where I am, Tamil Nadu in South India. Tamil Nadu has a population of 7 to 8 crores or 700 to 800 million. If one wants to stop the propagation, then 4 to 5 crores need to be infected or vaccinated. As of 25th May, that is yesterday, Tamil Nadu has 16,277 cases as detected by the RT-PCR test, which only picks up those people who have the virus in them at the time of testing. If the serological antibody test was available, then we could pick up more number of people and we could have a better idea of the actual number of people infected in the population, and some of them might have even got over the infection and may be immune. What are the risks to herd immunity? Mass vaccination has been highly successful in India using herd immunity for many diseases, protecting those that are unable to build up immunity, like people with immune deficiency or whose immune systems are being suppressed for medical reasons, say for example renal transplant patients. Although herd immunity is well established, however, some people, misguided people I might say, choose to behave as free riders, essentially benefiting from everybody else getting vaccinated while abstaining from vaccination because they choose not to and are actively anti-vaccination. When a population has got too many of these free riders, the overall immunity level is compromised and herd immunity can be lost, putting everyone at risk. So some obstinate people on totally wrong presuppositions or premises will be risking their own lives, because if there is no herd immunity, they also are at risk of getting the disease. So they are risking their own lives and that of others if they don't get vaccinated. No vaccine offers 100% protection, and a small proportion of individuals get infected despite vaccinations. Vaccines can fail in two main ways, known as primary or secondary vaccine failures. Primary vaccine failures occurs when an individual fails to make an initial immunological response to the vaccine. Infection can therefore occur at any point after vaccination. A good example of primary vaccine failure is the 5 to 10% of children who do not respond to the measles component of the first dose of MMR. The risk of measles in such children is reduced by offering an additional dose of vaccine, usually before school entry. Secondary failure occurs when an individual responds initially, but then protection wanes over time. The incidence of secondary vaccine failure therefore increases with time. Individuals who acquire infection despite vaccination may have a modified, milder form of disease and are less likely to suffer serious complications than those who have never been vaccinated. An example of secondary vaccine failure is pertussis or whooping cough. When protection against whooping cough after 3 doses is initially high but declines as a child gets older. A fourth booster dose is usually given to improve protection during the school years. I hope you are able to somewhat grasp the content of this video. If you found it useful, please like and share it. Suggest it to your friends and family. I will see you in the next video. Bye.